My mother was crying before I fully opened the door. Her face through the chain gap, the real kind of crying, the kind that has been happening for a while. My father half a step behind her, which was wrong. My father does not stand behind my mother. He leads. He speaks first. Not tonight. I had not given them my address. I opened the door. My mother said my name. I looked at the folder in her hands. Official paperwork, the kind with clasps. And at the document visible at the top, printed in the small, clean font, the Austin Housing Stability Initiative used on all its intake forms. My name was on it. One quick thing before I take you through what happened next. If someone has ever put you out and come back when they needed you, subscribe so the next story finds you. Tell me in the comments what they needed and whether you helped them. I read everyone. Not as a family member, not in the section for emergency contacts, in the box in the upper right corner labeled Assigned Advocate. Here is what they saw when I opened that door, and here is the full story of how I got there. My doorstep, 7:30 on a Tuesday in November, a woman crying, and a man who looked like he had been awake for 2 days. My mother, Rosario, in the coat she wore to church and to court, and to every occasion that required her to present herself as a person who managed things. My father, Hector, half a step behind her, with the expression of a man who has arrived somewhere he did not intend to need to arrive. The apartment behind me, 432 square feet, 3rd floor, East Austin, a second-hand bed frame, books on a shelf I had built from cinder blocks and boards, my guitar on a hook I had drilled into the wall myself, a kitchen with 2 plates and a pot that I had bought at a garage sale, and a coffee maker that I had splurged on because it was the thing that made the morning feel like something I owned. My name on the intake form in my mother's folder. All of it 3 months in the making. Let me take you back 3 months first, to the night I left, because the night I left is where this story actually begins. The cousin was named Miguel. He was 24, 2 years older than me, and had been living in a situation in San Antonio that had, in my mother's telling, become untenable. He needed somewhere stable. We had a spare room. Family helps family, which is a sentence I have heard my entire life, in which I believe in the general sense, and which on this particular Wednesday evening was being applied in a direction that surprised me. My parents told me at dinner. They always delivered significant things at dinner, I think because they understood, somewhere below the level of decision-making, that the eating gave you something to do while you received the information, and the something to do made it easier to not respond immediately. My room, which I had been living in for 22 years, which had my books organized by subject on the shelves, my clothes in the closet, my guitar on a stand in the corner, the wooden desk I had saved money for 3 months at 15 to buy because I had decided I wanted a real desk and not the folding table I had been using. My room. My sister Gabby was at the table. She looked at me when my mother said it and did the specific eye roll of a person for whom this news resolves something. Finally, more space. The eye roll of someone who has found you too large for the room for a long time and is relieved the adjustment is being made formally. You don't live here anymore, my father said. He did not say it as cruelty. He said it as information, as clarification, as if the sentence was obvious, and he was simply making sure I had it. I was in my 2nd year of community college. I came home on weekends. My toothbrush was in the bathroom. According to the sentence, this was not enough to constitute living there. I said okay. I said it the way I said things when I was not going to get into it. Flat, quiet, the conversational signal that means I have received the information and will be processing it elsewhere. I went upstairs. I packed the big bag with clothes and the smaller one with the things that mattered. My notebooks, some books I reached for often, the charger, the medication I kept on my nightstand. I took the guitar in its case. I took the desk lamp because I had paid for it and I was not donating it to Miguel's use. I left the desk because it would not fit in a cab. I texted Clara, "Can I crash on your couch?" She said yes immediately, not in 5 minutes, immediately, which is the answer of someone who knows the difference between a theoretical request and a real one. I came downstairs. My parents were watching television. Gabby was on her phone. I said goodnight to my mother, who looked at the bags and held something in her face that might have been a question and might have been the beginning of a sentence that would have changed the shape of the evening. She said, "Take your key in case you need to come back." I took the key, I set it on the kitchen table. I left. Here is what those first 3 months were. The first 2 weeks on Clara's couch were the hardest, and I want to be honest about what made them hard, because it was not the couch. Clara's couch was a good couch, a real couch, the kind of couch that signals someone has their life together enough to have bought a piece of furniture, rather than inheriting one. What made the 2 weeks hard was the specific weight of having been made to understand that you were optional. That the room, your room, the room with your things in it, could be assigned to someone else while you were eating dinner. That you don't live here anymore was a sentence your father could say to you with the television on in the background and your sister's eye roll going unaddressed beside you. That sentence had a weight, and I carried it into the nights on Clara's couch, and I am being accurate rather than dramatic when I say it kept me awake. Not every night, but enough nights. Clara is the kind of friend who does not fill silence with the wrong things. She did not tell me what I should have done, or what I should do next, or whether my parents had been reasonable or unreasonable. She made coffee in the mornings and sat with me and let me be awake, and did not offer advice until I asked for it. On the third morning, I asked for the job listing site. She opened her laptop, pulled it up, and slid it across the table without comment. Then she refilled her coffee and started reading something else, which is the most useful thing you can do for a person who is looking for work. Give them the resource and leave them alone with it. That is the best thing anyone did for me in the first month, and I have thought about it when I sit across from people in intake appointments and try to give them what they actually need, rather than what I assume they need. I found work in week 1. Administrative assistant at a nonprofit called the Austin Housing Stability Initiative. Data entry, scheduling, front desk, the unglamorous infrastructure of an organization that helps people navigate housing instability. $22 an hour. Not enough to move immediately, but enough that I could see the math to a studio deposit if I was careful for 6 weeks. I was careful for 6 weeks. In week 7, I moved into the studio. 432 square feet, East Austin, 3rd floor, one window that faced the parking lot of a dry cleaner's. I bought a bed frame from a woman on Marketplace who was moving and needed it gone by Friday. I borrowed a pot and 2 plates from Clara until I found my own at a garage sale. I drilled a hook into the wall and hung the guitar on it, which was the first time I had ever drilled anything into anything, and the satisfaction of it was completely disproportionate to the task, and I do not apologize for that satisfaction. The ASHI training for new administrative staff covered tenant rights, local housing codes, and the emergency assistance application system. I went through it because it was required, and then something happened that I had not expected, which was that I found it genuinely interesting. Not in a forced way. Not the way you decide something is interesting because you need it to be. The specific, authentic interest of a person who has encountered a system and wants to understand how it actually works. The gap between what the housing protection laws said and what happened in practice when someone without resources or fluency tried to use them. The places where the system required knowledge it did not provide, expertise it assumed, forms that contradicted each other, deadlines that appeared without notice. I started staying after my shift ended. I started asking the advocates questions about the cases they were working. One of them, a woman named Patricia who had been doing tenant advocacy for 11 years and who wore comfortable shoes and had the specific kind of patience that develops when you have seen every variation of a problem and still believe the solving of it matters, started letting me sit in on her intake appointments. About 6 weeks in, Patricia said, "You should look at getting your tenant advocate certification." I asked what that involved. She described the coursework and the required supervised hours. I said I would think about it. I signed up the next morning. By November, I was a certified tenant advocate with 2 volunteer evenings a week and 3 active cases. The cases were people navigating emergency rental assistance applications, forms that were technically available and practically very difficult, that required documentation people were often being asked to produce on short timelines, while also managing the crisis that had produced the application. I was good at it, not because I am naturally patient or especially skilled at bureaucracy, but because I had a kind of understanding that was not theoretical. I knew what it felt like to need a stable place and not have one, to put a key on a table and walk out with 2 bags and not know what came next. That understanding is either a qualification or a liability in this kind of work. I had decided to treat it as the former, and the work seemed to agree. 3 days before my parents appeared at my door, a new intake landed on my desk on a Friday afternoon at 4:15 p.m. Hector and Rosario Vasquez, ages 51 and 49, owners of a small catering company that had operated for 16 years in Austin. The company had lost its primary contract in August when a hotel group that accounted for 60% of their annual revenue changed vendors without notice. They had operated on the contract for 9 years. They had not believed they needed to diversify because the relationship had seemed stable. This is a thing I have seen in many small business cases, the stability that becomes a vulnerability because it was never formalized as security. 4 months of reduced income, 2 months behind on the rental property they had taken on 3 years ago, during a stable period, and which they now could not exit without a penalty that would cost more than the past due rent. A 15-day notice to quit, served 10 days ago, 5 days left. They needed help navigating the emergency rental support application and, if possible, a mediated payment agreement with the landlord. I looked at the names. I looked at the address, 2214 Flores Street, which was my parents' house, which was the address I had grown up in and moved out of with 2 bags in September. I looked at the application date, 3 days ago. I looked at the assigned advocate field, which had my name in it because Patricia assigns new cases on a rotation, and it was my turn. I sat with it for a moment. Then I went and knocked on Patricia's door. I told her the applicants were my parents. I told her I had left their home 3 months ago under circumstances that were complicated, and that they did not know I worked here or volunteered here, and that I did not know what the appropriate next step was. I told her I was not sure if I should transfer the case or keep it. Patricia was quiet for a moment, which is what she did when she was thinking, rather than when she was uncertain. Then she said, "Do you think you can help them effectively?" I said yes. I knew the application system. I knew their situation from the intake form well enough to know exactly what they needed and how to get it. She said, "Do you want to help them?" I said I needed a day to answer that. She said, "Take the day." I used the whole day. I went home after work and I sat in my studio, in the chair I had bought at a secondhand furniture place for $30, which was the most comfortable chair I had ever owned, and I sat with the case file, and with the last 3 months, and with the specific memory of putting the key on the kitchen table and walking out. I thought about the couple from the Rundberg neighborhood, my first successfully closed case, who had received a notice to quit with 4 days on it, and who had not known they had rights or a process available to them until I walked them through it. I thought about the woman in Round Rock with the incorrectly filed case, who would have been in court without representation if Patricia had not been there, and if I had not done the 3 phone calls it took to correct the error. I thought about what those people had in common with my parents, and what they did not have in common. They did not have a daughter in a housing nonprofit. My parents did, whether they knew it yet or not. The next morning I called my brother Marco, not my parents, Marco, who is 3 years older than me, and who texted me occasionally to make sure I was okay, and who had been doing this with the careful tact of someone navigating a situation that was not his to resolve. I told him to give my parents my address. I told him they should come by Tuesday evening. I did not tell him why. He texted back, "Everything all right?" I said, "It will be. Tell them to come." They came on Tuesday. I had cleaned the apartment that afternoon. Not for them, for myself, the way I cleaned it every other week, the routine that had become the rhythm of the studio. But it was clean when they arrived, which was information about how I lived, available for free to anyone who came through the door. My mother was crying before I fully opened the door. I looked at them. I looked at the folder. I looked at my name in the upper right corner of the intake form, assigned advocate. "Lena," my mother said again. She said my name the way she said it when she was not sure what was happening and needed something to hold on to. I looked at my father. He had found his voice in the way of someone who has been rehearsing a speech on the way over and finds, at the door, that the speech does not fit the situation. He said, "We have a situation, a serious one. We need..." He stopped. He had seen the apartment behind me. The clean kitchen, the bookshelves, the guitar on the wall, the $30 chair. He had seen the things I had built in 3 months, from a couch and a job listing and a security deposit. His face moved through something I recognized. Not quite surprise, not quite recognition, the expression of someone updating a picture they had been carrying. Then he looked at the folder in my mother's hands. He looked at the document at the top. He read the text in the upper right corner. "Is that your name on that form?" he said. "Yes," I said. He looked at it again, then at me, then at the folder. A man doing arithmetic that kept coming out the same unexpected answer. "You work at the housing." "I volunteer there," I said. "As a tenant advocate. Your case was assigned to me 3 days ago." I paused. "I called Marco, told him to send you." My mother made a sound that was the beginning of several different things simultaneously. Relief, grief, something that did not have a clean name in either language she thought in. "Come in," I said. "I'll make tea." They came in. I made tea, which is what I do when I need a reason to leave the room for 5 minutes and think. I could hear my mother crying more quietly in the kitchen doorway, which was not better but was different. The kind of crying that happens when relief and grief are happening simultaneously and cannot decide which is stronger. My father sat on my second-hand couch with his hands on his knees and looked at the guitar on the wall and the books on the shelf I had built from cinder blocks and boards, the way students build bookshelves when they have more books than money. I came back with tea. I put the cups on the table. I sat across from them. "Show me the form," I said. My father took it from my mother and held it out to me. I took it. I looked at it with the same attention I gave every intake. The dates, the notice language, the landlord's filing, the income documentation they had attached. I looked at the case number, which I recognized from my desk 3 days ago. I looked at my own name in the corner. "Okay," I said. "Here is what we're going to do. I am going to help you navigate this application. Not because you're my parents." I paused. My mother made a sound that was the beginning of a sentence she did not finish. "Because it's my job to help people in this situation. And you are in this situation, and I know how to help with it, and so I'm going to help you." My father said, "Lena, we'll talk about the rest later," I said. "Right now we're going to go through this form." He nodded. Once. The small nod of a man who understands that the person across the table is the one with the knowledge in this moment, and who is, for once, in a position of needing to follow. The application took 2 hours and 14 minutes. I know the exact time because I clock my advocacy sessions. I walked them through it in the order the system required. Income documentation first, with the right way to present the business loss as a change in circumstances rather than a default. Then the landlord communication history, which my father had some of but not organized, and we organized it. Then the application for emergency rental support, which had 4 sections that required specific language if they were to be taken seriously by the reviewing board. Then the mediation request, which could trigger a 60-day stay on the eviction proceedings, if filed within the next 5 days. My parents answered my questions. My mother cried twice, briefly, and I acknowledged it and then continued, because grief in the middle of an intake is real, and it does not stop the deadline. My father was patient for most of it. Near the end, there was a form section that repeated information they had already provided in a different section, and he made a comment about the redundancy. I said, "The redundancy exists because the 2 sections are processed by different reviewers. Both need to have the information independently. Arguing with the design costs time we don't have," he said, after a moment. "You sound like someone who has done this before." I said, "I've done it several times." He was quiet. Then, "How many people have you helped?" I told him, 5 closed cases, 3 active. Patricia had told me last week I was one of the stronger new advocates she had seen. I said this not to impress him, or not only to impress him, but because the information was relevant to his confidence in the process. He looked at the table. I kept going with the application. The application was submitted at 9:47 p.m. I walked them to the door. My mother hugged me at the threshold, which was different from the hug at the end of a normal family dinner, the kind that holds something more than itself. She said my name twice, quietly, into my shoulder. I held the hug. I held still while she held on, which is the thing about my mother. She expresses things through holding on, rather than through words, and the holding on told me more than the words she had said over the previous 2 hours. I let it. There was nothing I needed to say in that moment. The moment did not need me to say anything. My father shook my hand. This is what he does when he does not know how to do the other thing. He shakes hands. It is the gesture that means, "I respect you, and I do not know what else to do right now." I shook his hand. He kept hold of it for slightly longer than a handshake requires, which was, from my father, a significant communication. "We're going to talk," he said. Statement, not question. "Yes," I said. "About everything." "Yes, but not tonight. Tonight the application gets submitted." He nodded. He let go of my hand. I went back inside, closed the door, sat in the kitchen in my $30 chair. The tea had gone cold. I drank it anyway because I had made it and I do not waste things anymore. Living on $22 an hour in week 2 on Clara's couch teaches you not to waste things. Here is what I want to say, and I want to say it carefully, because it would be easy to hear this story as a revenge story. The version that functions as revenge is, the family that put you out comes back needing you, and you have what they need, and the tables have turned. That version is satisfying. It has a clean shape. The person who was made small gets to be large exactly when it counts. I understand the satisfaction of that version, but it is not quite what happened. What happened is, I left and I built something, and what I built happened to be exactly what my parents needed 3 months later. I did not build it for them. I did not know they would need it. I built it because Patricia asked me if I had thought about getting certified, and I said I would think about it, and the next morning I signed up. I built it because the Runberg couple needed someone to make 4 phone calls on their behalf, and no one else was available to make them. I built it because I understood, from a place that was not theoretical, what it meant to need a stable place, and to not know how to find one. I built it for strangers. And then my parents arrived, and they were, in the sense that mattered for the intake form, strangers. They were 2 applicants in a situation I knew how to address. So the thing I had built for strangers helped them too, because the thing I had built did not know who to help and who to refuse. It helped whoever was in front of it. That is not justice. It is not irony. It is just the way things work sometimes. When you redirect the energy you were spending on a place that was making you small, you cannot predict what you will build. You cannot predict who it will circle back to. You cannot predict that the certification you signed up for on a Wednesday morning, because a woman named Patricia asked you a question, will result in a case being assigned to you that involves the people who showed you the door. You just build it. You make it as good as you can. And then sometimes the building reveals purposes you did not put into it. That is the thing about building something for strangers. It does not know who it is for. The couple in Runberg did not know me when they walked into the intake appointment. The woman in Round Rock did not know me. My parents did not know. When a caseworker named Marcus at Ashi assigned their case to the rotation on a Friday afternoon, that the advocate it went to was someone who had eaten dinner at their table the previous Wednesday and said okay, and left with 2 bags. The world is smaller than you think, and the good work you do in it moves through the smallness in ways you cannot track. Do it anyway. Do it for the strangers who are in front of you right now, and let it find whoever it is meant to find next. The caseworker who assigned my parents' file on a Friday afternoon did not know what he was setting in motion. He was doing his job, routinely, the way Patricia does hers and the way I now do mine. The routine work, done consistently and well, is where most of the good things happen. Not in the dramatic moments, in the rotation, in the Friday afternoon assignment, in the person who signs up for the certification the morning after she said she would think about it. Show up for the rotation. That is the whole instruction. The caseworker who assigned my parents' file to the advocate rotation on a Friday afternoon did not know what he was setting in motion. He was doing his job, doing it routinely, the way Patricia does her job and Marcus does his job, and the way I now do mine. The routine work, done consistently and well, is where most of the good things happen. Not in the dramatic moments, in the rotation, in the Friday afternoon, in the person who signs up the morning after she said she would think about it. Show up for the rotation. That is the whole instruction. My parents and I are in a different conversation than the one we were in 3 months ago. It moves slowly and it is not smooth. My father called me 2 weeks after the intake, not to update me on the case. Patricia was handling that, just to call. He said, "I didn't know you could do that." He meant the intake, the forms, the 2 hours. He meant that he had not understood that I was the kind of person who could do that. I told him I had always been capable of it. That capability had not arrived in the last 3 months. It had been there, and the question was whether anyone had been paying attention to what I was capable of when it was not directly useful to them. He was quiet for a long time. He said, "That's fair." I told him I was not saying it to be hard on him. I was saying it because it was true, and he and I both functioned better with the truth available than without it. He said, "Also fair." We have had 3 conversations since then. They are longer than the conversations we had before. They contain information about me that I had never offered and he had never asked for. He has been asking, I have been offering. It is a slow process, and I am not in a hurry about it. My mother sends me food. Not money, not a formal apology, not a conversation about what happened on the Wednesday in September. Food, rice and beans, sometimes tamales, once the mole she only makes on important occasions, left at my door with a text that says, "Just left something outside." She does not come in when she drops it off. She leaves it and goes, which is her way of giving me something without requiring me to receive it in front of her, which is more perceptive than I had given her credit for. I eat the food. It is good. She has always been a good cook, which is one of the things about her that I have always known and not always said out loud. I am working on saying the things I know and have not said. That is part of the different conversation. Gabby has not called. I expect she won't for a while. That is a longer story and a slower one, and I hold space for it without expecting it. Miguel is still in my room. I have not asked about that. The room is not the point. The room was never the point. The point, if there is one, and I am still deciding whether this was a point or a thing that happened that I am calling a point because I find the shape of it useful, is this. The night I put the key on the kitchen table and walked out, I was not building toward anything in particular. I had no plan. I had Clara's couch and my guitar and 2 bags, and the knowledge that 22 years in a house that had decided I was optional had not actually made me optional. The leaving was the most productive thing I had done in years. Not productive in the sense my father meant the word, not in dollars or status or the visible markers of a life going in an approved direction. Productive in the sense of, I became more of who I actually was in those 3 months than in the 2 years preceding them. The guitar started sounding better because I played it more. I read more. I slept better after the first 2 weeks. I discovered that I was interested in housing advocacy in a way that surprised me, and that I have since come to understand as the kind of interest that develops when something connects to something real in your own experience, rather than just being a topic. You are more when you are not being made to be less. I have said this already. I am saying it again because I think it is worth saying twice. You are more when you are not being made to be less. That is not a revelation. I am not saying it because it is new. I am saying it because it was true, and I needed 3 months of evidence to feel the weight of it, and the weight is something I want to pass on in case you need it too. The night I left, I did not know what I was going to build. I did not know about Ashi or Patricia, or the certification, or the Runberg couple, or the woman in Round Rock. I did not know my parents' case would end up on my desk. I did not know any of the shape of what was coming. I just knew the table the key was on, and the door, and the 2 bags. That was enough. The going was enough. You do not have to know the shape of the thing before you leave. You just have to leave. The shape reveals itself in the going, not before. Go. And when you get wherever you land, ask the questions, sit in on the meetings, sign up the next morning, show up for the people who are in front of you, build it for strangers first, and let it find its own purposes later. And if the people who showed you the door come back to it 3 months later, you get to decide what you do. Not from what you owe them, not from what they deserve or don't deserve, from the place of who you have become in the months since you left. That person gets to decide. No one else. The application was submitted at 9:47 p.m. on a Tuesday in November. I texted Patricia at 9:49, submitted, all sections complete, mediation request included. She texted back, good. She is efficient with her words in a way I have come to appreciate. The stay on the eviction proceedings was granted 4 days later. The mediation with the landlord was scheduled. My parents entered into a payment arrangement they could manage given their current income. Patricia closed the case at the end of November. My parents are still in their house on Flores Street. Miguel is still in my room. I know this from Marco, who provides these updates in the matter-of-fact way he provides all updates, without editorializing. I have not asked my parents about it. The room is not the point. The room was a container. I took the things from it that mattered and I left. And I built a different container, and I put different things in it, and those things are mine, in a way the room never was. I am in my apartment, 432 square feet, the guitar on the wall, the $30 chair, the books on the cinder block shelves, the coffee maker I splurged on, the intake forms on my desk for next week's cases, 2 new ones, assigned Monday, each of them a person in a situation I know how to address. My own. All of it, entirely my own. That turns out to be enough. It turns out to be more than enough. It turns out to be the kind of enough that has a weight of its own. A good weight. The weight of a life that is yours in the real sense, not just in the sense of having your name on the mailbox, but in the sense of having chosen it, built it, earned it with money you worked for, and decisions you made alone. The kind of enough that nobody can give away while you are eating dinner and the television is on. If this story found you tonight, subscribe so the next one reaches you. Every week I tell another story about someone who left and discovered what they were when nobody was managing them, and I would hate for the next one to miss you. And go to the comments and tell me, what did you build in the months after you left? Whatever it was, however small, say it out loud. I'll be down there reading every word.